What's up, guys? Welcome back to a Living My channel, where I talk to you about how I'm living my American dream. So today I want to talk to you about Dave Ramsey. More specifically, I want to talk to you about his baby steps outlined in his book, Total Money Makeover. Now let me say something out front first. I think Dave Ramsey is awesome. I think the programs that he has to help people with their finances are fantastic. I know he's helped thousands, probably millions of people at this point with their finances. That said, there are some things within his baby steps that I have an issue with. And I think if you sincerely want to reach financial independence, if you want to grow your wealth, your net worth, you need to think about these baby steps just a little bit differently. So I'm going to go through them, and I'm going to tell you what I think about them as we go through it. So the first one is save $1,000. Very first step. That's an important one because there's been some research that says most Americans cannot deal with a $1,000 emergency. If your car broke down, if you had an accident, if you were missing a paycheck, that $1,000 can be a big deal. Apparently, $1,000 is kind of the gateway for a lot of these problems, and it's an issue that a lot of Americans can't really deal with. So being able to save $1,000, set it aside as the start of an emergency fund, I think it's a great first step, especially if you're somebody who's just starting out learning to manage your finances. The second baby step, pay off all debt. Now it says pay off all debt except your house. And he encourages to use the debt snowball. Debt snowball means you pick one loan, usually the one with the highest interest rate, and you put as much money toward that one as possible. So you pay the minimum payment on everything so that you don't default on your loans. But whatever excess money you've got, you put it all towards one. Once that one's paid off, you take the money that you were paying for that one plus all the excess and put it toward the next highest interest rate one. And you keep building until you get to the last one. So that's why it's a snowball, because you're adding money as you move down the line. The snowball gets bigger and bigger. You're able to pay off other debt a little bit faster. Now this is the first baby step where I start to have an issue. Dave Ramsey is very much against debt. And I understand why he's like this, because first of all, from his experience, he suffered a huge financial setback because he was so much in debt. He was doing real estate, way too overstretched on his loans, and it backfired. I'm a big believer in taking on responsible debt. So I don't like to over leverage myself where I owe $1 million and my income can't support it, so on and so forth. I need to have balance so that if things get really bad, I can still pay my loans. I can still uphold my commitments to the banks. So I understand his point of view from there. Secondly, I understand his point of view because honestly in America, debt is a huge deal. Americans carry one of the largest credit card debts individually as a person anywhere in the world. We take out student loans. Student loans right now are a huge crisis. We finance every single car, and people buy cars that are way too expensive for their standard of living. People buy houses that are way too big, way too expensive for their income, for their salary. So we are very quick to take on debt that definitely stretches our finances way past the breaking point. Sometimes it puts us at our limits. Some people will stretch their debt way past the breaking point. So I can understand why he's so much against debt. However, the reason I have a problem with this is because if you're responsible with your finances, if you know how to manage debt and how to leverage it to your advantage, it can actually help you out a lot. So he says pay off all debt except house. Well, what about a car? Now, if you are low income, you probably should not be financing a car. You should try to buy it cash. Buy yourself a $5,000 car. It might take you a little bit to save up those $5,000, but you don't really need a whole lot more than that. Now I understand $5,000 car, it's not going to be anything fancy. You might not have Sirius XM and Apple CarPlay and all these things. But when you're first starting out and you're trying to build your wealth and your savings and your investments, you can't afford to go out and spend big money on expensive cars. That said, if you're a little bit more financially stable, you've got a good salary and stuff like that, and you do finance a car, and you've got good credit, and the interest rate is say 2.5%, I would tell you, you don't necessarily need to pay off that car right away. if the interest rate is super low. The reason being, I would want you to invest money that's going to make you more than the interest rate that you're paying on that vehicle. So if you're able to invest $5,000 and make 6% interest on that $5,000, that's going to make you more money than the interest that you would pay on a $5,000 loan for a vehicle. So in those situations, it varies. I would say if the interest you make on your investments make you more money than the interest you make on the debt, you should invest the money, just make the payments on your debt. In the long run, you'll end up coming out on top. And it also turns out to be somewhat of forced savings, because you're forcing yourself to put money aside for investments to make up for the interest that you're making, or the interest payments that you're making on your debt. Now, if the interest rate is super high on that debt, say credit cards, sometimes they have 15, 20, 25% interest rates. If you have like a title loan, if you have a personal loan, sometimes those are 15%. So if it's super high interest rate, definitely 8% or higher, you should try to pay that off as quickly as possible. But if it's low, I think you're okay to take your time. The next one, he says, save 3 to 6 month expenses. I think that's a great one. He calls that a fully funded emergency fund, but it really depends on your expenses. 3 months might be okay. It also depends on your job, how steady your income is. I'm in the military. My paycheck is, I would say, a lot more stable than most other jobs. So I might be okay with 3 months. If your job fluctuates a lot, where there's a chance of getting laid off, getting replaced, whatever the case may be, 6 to 9 months might be more appropriate. But I think that's a big one, because we talk about a lot of people can't afford a $1,000 emergency. But what if it goes beyond $1,000? What if COVID 27.0 comes around and you need to be able to support yourself for 3-4 months? You need those emergency funds. So I think that's a good one. What I would say is you should build that up before you do anything else. So he's talking about pay off all debt. Yes, I want you to pay off your debt, but me personally, I would want you to build up your emergency fund just a little bit more, maybe not 3 to 6 months, but definitely past $1,000 before you start focusing on paying off all your debt. Again, I can't give you a specific number. If I was going to say a generality, I would say maybe $3,000 to $5,000 as a general rule for the public. But it's really going to depend on you. What are your costs, your living expenses, your mortgage, gas that you spend, your children's education, things like that. So it might vary, but you definitely need a little bit more than $1,000 before you start trying to focus on other things. The fourth step that he talks about is investing 15% of your income towards retirement. Now, this one's a little tricky because, yes, you should invest towards retirement. The percentage is going to vary based on your salary. If you're only making $30,000 a year, 15% might be good. If you're making $100,000 a year, I venture to say you should probably be investing 30, 35, maybe 40%, a little bit more if you can. So it really depends on your salary. Additionally, it's going to depend on when do you want to retire. If you want to retire at 65, 15% might be okay. If you're 20 years old, 25 years old, you plan to retire at 65, it might be okay. If you're 40, 45 years old and you're just now starting and you want to retire at 65, you might need to bump that up to 20, 25%. If you're above 50, you're trying to retire at 65 and you're just not getting started, you're going to have to save a whole lot more. So it really depends. Now, let's say you're young, but you don't want to wait till you're 65. Say you're 25 and you want to retire at 35. Again, 15% is not going to be enough. So you can't make that generality of just save 15% towards retirement. That, I feel like that advice is geared for people who know they're going to work until they're 65. Now, you might work till you're 65, 70, 80 years old. But what I want you to think about is I want you to have the option to choose when you want to work. I want you to have the option to change jobs if you want to change jobs, to move to a different city if you want to move to a different city, to completely change career fields from I'm a lawyer, now I want to be an artist, or I'm an artist, now I want to be a cook, whatever you want to do. But you can't do that if you're not financially independent, if you don't have your finances in order to be able to support you while you make these transitions. So it's important that you start thinking about when you want to retire and adjust your retirement plans, adjust your investment plans to meet those needs. Which also ties into where you're going to invest it. If you put in a retirement account, like he suggests, you might not be able to touch that till you're 65. Whereas if you put it in an index fund or real estate or a small business or some side hustle, that's money that you can access earlier on without having to wait till you're 65. So those are things to consider as well. All right, the fifth baby step he talks about is saving for your children's college fund. Now this one is going to be up to you. I'm in the military, and I started the military as enlisted, meaning I went from high school straight to the military, and I let the military pay for college, both my undergrad and grad school. But a lot of the people that I've met in the military, especially those of us that started as enlisted, say that they do not intend to pay for the children's college. The reason being, they figure, I made my own way in this world, my children need to do so as well. On the flip side, I've had some friends, also on the enlisted side, who said, you know what, I struggled coming up. I joined the military because it was one of my few options. I wanted to go to college, but I couldn't afford it. My parents couldn't afford it. So I want to be able to pay for my children's college education. I'm in that camp. I personally have made it a goal to pay for both of my boys' college education, because I want to give them a leg up so that when they start their adult lives after college, they don't have to worry about paying back student loans. I'm not going to tell you that's the right way. That's what my wife and I have decided is right for us. That's what we're going to do. But you got to decide for yourself if that's what you want to do. So I don't like that he includes it as a baby step, as if it's something you have to do. Like you're a bad parent if you don't pay for your college education. I'm going to pay for my boy's education, but I don't think you are a bad parent if you decide you're not going to. If you decide, hey, son, daughter, whatever, you want to go to college, figure it out. There's student loans. There's scholarships. Do well in school, you can get some scholarships. You want to go to art school, become a good artist, practice, you can go to art school. There's a lot of ways to pay for college besides just taking out loans or asking your parents to pay for it. So I'm not going to judge you for that. And that's why I think having that as a baby step, as in this list of things you have to do, is the right way to go. Because again, each one of you is going to make your decision for yourselves. The last one that he talks about, actually the sixth one that he talks about, is to pay off your home early. So this goes back to my point earlier about paying off all debt. If you want to retire, say in the next 10 years, and you want to be able to sleep easy at night with, no debt whatsoever, then yes, pay off your home early. That's going to help you sleep easy at night. You know that no matter what happens, you've got a roof, you've got somewhere to sleep. Things can get really bad, but you've got a place to stay. Obviously, you still have to pay property taxes. You still have to set money aside every month for repairs. Just because the house is paid off doesn't mean you never have to put money into it. So you still have to do that, right? But at least you don't have to make that monthly payment anymore for the principal and the interest, which is a huge chunk of money, especially if you're in an expensive city, San Diego, New York, LA, and in one of those places. So that might work out in those scenarios, right? But here's the thing. Going back to what I was saying earlier about paying off debt. Most home loans, interest rate on those are ridiculously low if you have decent credit. So especially right now, 2022, rates are expected to go up throughout the next 12 to 18 months. But right now, they're ridiculously low, historically low. You can get a home loan right now with good credit for around 2.5%. That's pretty good. 2.5% on a 30-year loan if you get a fixed rate loan, which you should always do. Do not recommend variable loans unless you really know what you're getting yourself into. Go with a fixed loan. 2.5% for 30 years, not bad. Now, think about what I said earlier. Instead of paying off that, say, $200,000 property in 10 years, you make the minimum payments for 30 years. The excess cash that you would have put toward that house, you put into an index fund, S&P 500, total market fund, small cap index funds, put it into those, and the interest rate that you gain from those investments will greatly outperform the interest that you pay on the house. Now I'm talking long term. I'm talking for the length of the term for the house. So if you're paying the house in 30 years, you need to be investing for those 30 years. Because you got to understand, just like I said earlier, how the market goes up and down, well, guess what? Stocks do as well. Some years, S&P 500 goes up 20%. Other years, S&P 500 goes down 20, 30%. Over the long term, it goes up. So it'll go up, drop a little bit. Go up, drop a little bit. So you have to be in it for the long term. But when you space it out for that long a time, for 30 years, the interest that you gain on those investments it's going to far outweigh the interest that you would have paid on the house. Additionally, while you're making payments on this house, all the taxes that you pay on the house count against your taxes. So this is reducing your taxable income, a huge benefit to being a homeowner. Once you pay that off, you're giving up one of the biggest advantages financially to being a homeowner, and that's that tax depreciation. Again, this is one of those things that's going to be up to you. If you can sleep easy at night, knowing that, yes, I still owe $150,000 on my house, and I'm retired, I'm 70 years old, and I still owe money. But I've got money coming in from my Social Security, I've got money coming in from a pension, I've got money coming in from index funds that I've put in over the years. I've got a couple rental properties, and those are giving me money every single month. If I've got 4 to 8 sources of income in my retirement years, passive sources of income where I don't really have to do anything, maybe answer an email here and there, answer a call, and that money just keeps coming in, then I don't have to worry about having to make a mortgage payment. In fact, making that mortgage payment is helping me in retirement because, again, I'm writing off the taxes and I'm still growing my net worth with the equity pay down and all the other benefits of owning real estate. So in that case, I would say don't pay off the house. But again, it's going to be up to you. He wants you to be completely debt-free. Don't do anything until you're completely debt-free. And then go into the 7th step, which is his final step, which is to build wealth and give. Problem is, if you really think about wealthy people and how they function, they use debt. People who start businesses, not everybody of course, but most people who start businesses and run businesses use debt. Companies, large companies from the S&P 500 on down, use debt. That's what investors are. Investors are putting money into a company. That's money that the companies use in to grow their companies. Some of them pay dividends on those stock investments. They take out loans from banks. They borrow money from big-time investors. They work with other companies to raise funds. They use debt. But the challenge is using debt smartly. Using debt that is going to cost you less than the money you make on your investment. That's where Dave Ramsey really loses me, because he's all about debt-free, debt-free, debt-free. But he doesn't acknowledge the fact that if you're smart and disciplined, debt can work to your advantage. Credit cards even can work to your advantage. You can get points, you can get all kinds of benefits from credit cards. The problem is a lot of us are not disciplined in how we use our credit cards and how we manage debt. We take on debt and can't afford the payments. We use credit cards to max them out, can't afford those payments, and so we got ourselves in trouble. And for those people, the 7 baby steps that Dave Ramsey sells are magnificent. They will save your life. But if you're ready to take it to the next level, I'm telling you, analyze, reevaluate what you're thinking when it comes to Dave Ramsey, because he's going to get you stuck. He might get you out of debt, which is great. And some of you, if you follow Dave Ramsey, you'll see the posts from people with their signs saying, I paid off $150,000 in 3 years, and they're celebrating. And I'm happy for you all. If you've done that, I'm happy for you. Paying off debt like that, especially in a short amount of time, is a huge accomplishment. And I think that's great, and it should be celebrated. But what next? If that's all you've done and you haven't invested greatly other than maybe the 15%, if you haven't started a side hustle and a business and investments here and there in real estate, if you haven't done all these things with the power and leverage, with the power of leveraging debt, then you're going to be far behind. And you're going to get passed up by the people who are disciplined enough and smart enough to use that to their advantage. All right, guys, that's my whole spiel on Dave Ramsey. Hopefully you got something out of this. Now, like I said, don't have anything against Dave Ramsey. I think a lot of the stuff that he says is great, and it helps probably 90% of Americans out there. But for those of you that are ready to take it to the next step, hopefully this helped you out a little bit to help you understand some of the fallacies that can hold you up. If you like what I said, hit that like button. If you think I'm wrong, I want to hear what you got to say. Drop a comment. I want to talk about it. I want to understand how you're seeing it, and maybe together we can come to a consensus. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button so you know when I upload the next video. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.